This is actually one of the craziest stories that I've seen in a long time. The Trump administration took legal action to declare MS-13 and Trendy-Aragua terror groups so that they could invoke the Alien Enemies Act and deport these people from our country. They did so using, the leftists claiming there was no due process of law that was used here, but that was due process of law. They deported them, and then a judge in the middle of these flights, these airliners are in the air taking these criminals down to El Salvador, and this judge says, turn those flights around and bring these terrorists back. What's your reaction to this?
Well, look, there's the big argument over the planes were over international waters and a judge can't instruct the president on foreign policy actions. How insane to think that a single district judge at the lowest level is going to instruct the president, who has entered into a binding agreement with a foreign nation, that he must dissolve that agreement. What we're talking about is El Salvador accepting criminal aliens at the expense of the U.S. taxpayer for a service rendered by a foreign country, which is foreign policy treaty negotiations from the president. And a single judge says, nope, in midair, in the middle of this transaction, cancel it and turn these people back and bring them back to this country is nuts. I'd even argue this. They're saying the big question is whether or not the planes took off before or after the judge's ruling. And the Democrats want to argue the planes were on the ground and Trump rushed them out before the judge could issue his ruling. And I'd say, I don't care if it was an hour or 2 hours. The idea that Donald Trump would enter into a foreign treaty to deport non-citizens, criminals on top of that. I got to be honest. I don't care if the only thing they did was they crossed the border illegally. You're an illegal immigrant. We deport you. If the judge issued his ruling and then 2 hours later Trump flew these people out, I still would be like, a judge is not going to interrupt and upset international relations. That is a psychotic premise. This goes back to the same argument made over classified documents. They said, we found a bunch of classified documents in Trump's house. Therefore, he broke the law. Despite the fact Joe Biden had the same thing and admitted it was for money, I digress. The idea that Trump, as the president of the United States, needed to get permission to declassify something is the most insane argument a person could make, and no sane person should recognize this. Let's entertain this. They're concerned about Donald Trump having classified information at his house pertaining to Iran nuclear program or something like this. They're arguing Trump doesn't have the authority to have those classified documents or declassify them. That would imply that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin would come to negotiate, and Vladimir Putin would say, we will come to peace and give up all of the Donbass so long as the U.S. removes any military in Ukraine. And then Trump goes to him, well, I wish I knew. I can't tell you because Congress has to give me permission. Putin would be like, so you can't actually negotiate peace? Trump would be like, let me call Congress and see if I can get approval for negotiating peace. That's insane. The president handles foreign policy decisions. So if you've got criminals who entered the country, they are not citizens, and the president says, we have negotiated a treaty with El Salvador. They are going, or an agreement, whatever, it's not a formal treaty, for X amount of dollars, they will take these people off from us. And then a judge is like, I have more authority than the president. He can't do that. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. If it was internal inside the country and Trump was going to transport them from D.C. to New York, okay, sure, maybe that makes sense. The plane would land and they'd say, stop. That plane's going to take back off and go back. We got a judge's orders. There's a TRO. It's being challenged. Fine. Internally, maybe. Foreign relations? A single district court judge trying to overrule the authority of the commander in chief on what is effectively foreign military application is insane. You can't do that.
It's even worse than the hypothetical that you give, because it's not just a matter of Trump and Putin in the same room, Putin asking Trump to negotiate and Trump saying, well, I have to ask Congress. It was as ridiculous as Trump saying, well, I have to ask the single inferior court judge, and who knows where he's even located. No one's even heard of him, because this guy has the authority to issue some unilateral injunction. And this brings me to a question we've talked about a lot on this show in the past couple of weeks, since these activist judges, most of whom have conflicts of interest, some of whom have significant financial conflict of interest with the Trump administration's agenda, have been issuing these injunctions to try to stop President Trump from executing his executive orders. What should be done when they don't have the authority to issue an injunction and they're doing it anyway? I argue, and I've argued on the show the last couple of weeks, that the Trump administration shouldn't actually respect them. It's no different than Michael Scott going out and saying, I declare bankruptcy. And it's like, okay, that's not how you do it. So you don't have to listen to that. What is your take on this? How should the Trump administration handle it?
For the past 4 years, technically longer, Democrats have ignored court rulings for the past several decades. Democrat states have ignored federal law, be it marijuana early on with federal enforcement. They don't agree with it. Even today, technically, they're still in violation. They ignore federal law. But the sanctuary states and cities is much more egregious, outright saying we are going to engage in a violation of federal law and aid and abet. So this is a violation of, I think it's 8 USC 1324. California offering free healthcare to non-citizens violates the law. Donald Trump then comes in and says, executive order, and they say, court order, stop. Okay, look, I get all these libertarians and people saying, Tim, you have to stick to your principles. Your principles. The Democrats are evil. They've stampeded through the system. They've ignored court orders. They've ignored federal law enforcement. We can't be like them. And I'm like, so you want to surrender? Should we surrender? Sure, let them create their communist type economic system with single party rule if you want. I'm not interested in that. So if you come to me as a Democrat and you say, where are your principles, Tim? Donald Trump is pushing his executive orders. I'll be like, didn't Joe Biden try to pass an amendment to the Constitution by tweet? So don't bother me with your stupid platitudes. When they criminally charged Donald Trump's lawyers, Jenna Ellis, who I'm not a fan of for a variety of reasons, but she was a lawyer representing Trump, which she is legally entitled to. The Constitution provides, and they charged her with RICO, 2 counts of conspiracy for simply representing Trump. I said, y'all just fired a shot across the bow. Not even. I mean, that's a declaration of administrative warfare. So now I'm just like, I don't care, Trump, do whatever you want. As far as I know, there's no rules anymore, and the Democrats are the ones that started it.
Yeah, I largely feel the same way because I don't feel obligated in our society to adhere to tyranny. I don't feel obligated in our society to obey someone simply because they have declared some kind of power over me if that power is not legitimate. I do think that there are if there is a reasonable mechanism of recourse, because we don't want to be vigilante justice, right? I don't support that. But if there's reasonable recourse, then yeah, use that reasonable recourse to remedy the situation. But in this case, when the recourse is completely peaceful and it's just ignoring someone who's trying to boss you around and has no authority to do so, that is what I think the Trump administration should do. And it's what I think they're going to do. They've asked the Supreme Court to rein in these inferior court judges because the Supreme Court has the authority to do that. If the Supreme Court, that's the mechanism of recourse that I'm talking about. If the Supreme Court doesn't do their job, then I think that Trump administration should just ignore that.
I don't think any of it matters. You're never going to convince a liberal to play by the rules, and they're going to beg you to play by the rules. You play by the rules, you get trampled over. Joe Biden's whole administration, the entirety of the past 4 years, was predicated upon we hate Donald Trump. Donald Trump is president in 2020. An election happens. The Democrats offered no policy. They offered but one thing: we hate Trump. What happens when you elect that? You lose Bagram Air Force Base. Afghanistan collapses in a miserable, pathetic way. You get escalating prices. You get national security blunders in Ukraine. You get, look how they could have stopped the Ukraine war from the get-go. Didn't happen under Donald Trump. You get an open border. That's what happens when you elect people based on nothing. Donald Trump comes in, and once again, the game they're playing is, we will just stop Trump. Okay, well, look, I sit here, last week on the Culture War talking about Doge, the liberal and a conservative guy, and I'm sitting here thinking, this is pointless. The Democrats and the machine state, which included both Democrats and Republicans over the past 20, 30 years, has been funneling NGO money circuitously through these various programs, jobs, companies, empty buildings. This video that Carrie Lake just put out, they've got this massive multi-million-dollar per month building empty. They are just funneling your money to themselves, and they beg you, once you get power, to stop trying to dismantle the corruption they've built. I literally don't care. Look, the one thing I'm concerned about with the deportations is the Trump administration should publish the roster. If these are criminal aliens and the worst of the worst, give us a database of every single. I want names. I want weight. I want height. I want to know when they came in. What I don't want to see is the president simply saying we have the authority to apprehend anyone we deem to be an illegal immigrant and deport them. Because what ends up happening is American citizens or legal people who are here as legal residents get caught up in things where they should not be removed. This is why we extend the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, to non-citizens with limitation. If you're walking down the street as an American citizen, no cop should be able to stop you and arrest you on suspicion of being an illegal immigrant, but they still try. All Trump has to do is be like, here's a list of the people that are on the plane, and I'd be satisfied by that. And I think that's largely what they do. I just want to see some transparency. If the Democrats want to come out and say, turn the planes around and bring the criminals back, then I'm laughing. Please, Democrats, campaign on this and tell every American how hard you fought to bring Tren de Aragua back into this country, because I look forward to winning a supermajority in the midterms in 2026.